This is Angola, West Africa, one of the most strategic frontiers in the American empire.
With the Middle East apparently collapsing ever further into chaos, this is going to be America's future focus in terms of its oil strategy. But already there's a great deal of dissent because it's the oil industry that is the slush fund for government corruption.
The American imperial grip on this part of the world is not as tight as they'd like it to be. Luanda, Angola's capital. It got independence from Portugal in 1975, but decades of conflict followed.
Just over 2 years ago, the main civil war in Angola came to an end.
Today, 14 million Angolans are trying to rebuild their lives. The revenues from the oil industry should make it easy. Output is growing. The oil price is shooting up. But there wasn't much of a peace dividend for children hanging around the city centre.
What's your name?
Antonio.
Antonio. I'm Sam.
Antonio?
Yeah?
Yes, man.
Good to meet you. This small group's going to take me to where they live.
Você é pequeno, amigo.
Is this where you sleep? Is this where you sleep?
The dormitory was deeper inside.
Here, right in the centre of Luanda, just across the street from gas stations and shishi bars, there's a big hovel being lived in by about 50 or 60 children living in conditions that are fit only for rats.
The only contact these kids have with the oil industry is through the petrol they sniff.
These children's biggest threat to their lives at the moment are the police, who routinely round them up, beat them, and they say they occasionally get killed and dumped. Some are orphans, some are runaways. They're just living here on the streets, absolutely downtown central Luanda.
One of the younger boys took me aside. He begged for help.
He wants to go back to home, but never see the...
This is Eduardo. He's never seen his parents. He thinks he's about 11 years old. He's desperate for help. He says, I'm eating rubbish, surrounded by others who are sniffing glue. And they have absolutely no support group beyond their own friends, such as it is. Hello.
The police turned up to check us out.
What up?
When the officers had gone, the boys insisted I come with them to another of their camps.
Osvaldo's the boss of the street kids. He's taking me through their secret route, apparently down into the sewers where they live.
One, two...
In Luanda, I've paid about 20 quid for a cup of coffee and a steak sandwich. These guys are very proud of the wild tomatoes that grow in the human feces that flows down this sewer, which is their home. And these are the only fresh vegetables they're going to get. Tá bom?
One in 4 Angolan children die before they reach their 5th birthday. There are more than 5,000 street kids in Luanda. No one knows how many in the rest of the country.
Jesus Christ. That's Osvaldo's bed right there. This is where Osvaldo and his friends live. Osvaldo's been here a year and a half, he says, and there are beds dangling from the ceiling as far as I can see, which is about 50 or 60 yards up this sewer. In the rainy season, which is just coming up in Luanda, these boys can't leave the sewer. They actually stay suspended in their beds because the sewer becomes 2 or 3 or 4 feet deep in filthy water.
Some of these boys have lived this way for 10 years. The surge in oil prices because of instability in the Middle East is fueling a bonanza for a select few. The challenge is in how to spend it.
We're in a very smart supermarket. It's like a private club. You need a special membership card. You have to pay up front. And everything is imported. Now, the strange thing about Angola is that whether you're rich or poor, the chances are you're going to eat imported food. The poor eat food from the World Food Programme, a gift from America usually. And the wealthy, the oil-rich, import everything, including cat food. Foie gras. No trip to Angola is complete without a pot of foie gras.
America needs Angola's oil, and it's US Ambassador Cynthia Effield's job to keep it flowing.
Hi. Hi. Sam Kiley.
Nice to meet you.
How important is Angola's oil strategically to America?
We receive about 5.5% of our non-OPEC oil from Angola. So, and there's thoughts that over the next 10 years, the United States will get maybe up to 20% of its oil from Africa.
The situation in Angola where the president's building at least 2 new palaces and his monthly income is only about $2,000 a month. I mean, you have got a straight conundrum there, haven't you?
I don't think any of us would argue that all the money that's being generated in Angola is going to the most socially productive means. We're looking at a country that's just coming out of 27 years of war. And I think one of the things we know is that after that many years of deprivation, people do feel a need to reward themselves. And what we would like to see is those rewards go to all the Angolan people who have suffered so long.
Rather than just a handful of people with jet skis on the beach.
Or rather than those who have first call, or who feel they should have first call.
And put simply, does that mean that if you don't get Angola right, the place is going to collapse and then your strategic oil reserves won't be safe?
You're quite right. We're at a crossroads.
Eduardo dos Santos has ruled Angola for 25 years. This is one of his 2 new palaces. Criticism of his regime can be fatal. Close to the palace, I came across a group of young men who told me about the murder of one of their friends.
Arsenio Sebastio was walking down from having taken his lunch up on the hill here, and he was singing a song that was anti-government by a local rapper, a rap artist called MCK. The song said, "Why do we have more guns than toys, more nightclubs than libraries?"
What followed became a national scandal.
Tony here watched as the presidential guard grabbed his friend, beat him, and then tied Arsenio's elbows together tightly behind him, and then forced him at gunpoint into the water. It appears that he tried to swim without using his hands to a buoy about 50 or 60 yards off the shore. And somewhere between here and that buoy, he bobbed up, was seen, went down, and wasn't seen again until the following day when his body washed up, dead.
Arsenio's buddies took me to see his widow, Angelina. She was left to care for their 2 young boys. She told me that when she'd been offered help by an opposition party, she was threatened by police.
Nós nos sentimos mesmo muito mal, mas nós não temos nada. Não temos, praticamente eu posso bem dizer que nós não temos armas para lutar contra eles.
And she says, what can we do? These guys have got the guns. We haven't got any guns.
Angelina's youngest lad is deaf and mute. There was an inquiry into his father's murder, but there have been no prosecutions.
The guy behind us was writing in his notebook, probably our number plate.
Yeah, it might be a spy.
Yeah. No, I saw him with he had a notebook and he was writing it and looking at us. That guy there with the white hat on.
There he is. Here he comes.
So that's the gentleman who's been following us around the township.
Angola's elite live discreetly luxurious lives. I met up with Arvind Ganasan from Human Rights Watch. He's crunched the numbers and knows how much government revenue is being siphoned off.
Exactly, yeah. So how much money is going missing?
Well, the most recent estimate in Angola is from 1997 to 2002, about $4.27 billion went missing. That's roughly 9.25% of the GDP of the country every year, and by comparison, it would be the same as if roughly $960 billion disappeared from the US economy every year, or about a little over 80 billion pounds from the British economy every year. So
Where's it going? Is it being nicked?
well, it appears that it's a combination of total mismanagement and corruption, and to a far lesser degree, just poor accounting. But I would say the bulk of it has been attributed to gross mismanagement and corruption.
The government says these figures are exaggerated. But if Angola is to navigate its way to stability and protect America's oil interests, much will depend on how the national income is spent. I set off for Quito in the far east of the country. It's a town I'd reported from 11 years ago in the middle of heavy fighting. I wanted to see how the city was recovering. It wasn't. Very little had changed since the bullets stopped flying. I'd sheltered from the fighting in this building during the war. What's left of it is still home to dozens of families.
They're starting to rebuild the provincial administration and the provincial administration's assembly and the governor's palace. They've hardly touched the hospitals, and they've made no effort at all to improve running water or any kind of sanitation.
I joined a crowd heading to a concert given by the rapper MCK. It was his band music which cost Arsenio his life. MCK is the voice of a generation of angry Angolans, and they've started to ask awkward questions.
These rappers have taken the opportunity of this concert to really basically stick it to the central government very, very vocally. They've been saying, I've just had lunch, but how come I've got no salt? How come we have to perform here in a stadium without a roof? They say the last governor enriched himself, built loads of farms, we got nothing, and now there's a new guy in town and he's ripping us off. They're absolutely seething with anger.
About 50% of Angolans are under 30. They believe they're getting ripped off by their leaders. Time to stop Angola collapsing back into anarchy and war is running out. Quito is a provincial capital, but there are still no regular flights. To catch a plane, I had to travel 5 hours across country. We saw almost no livestock, and most fields lay fallow. Farm animals were slaughtered in fighting years ago. Landmines prevent farmers from getting back to work. After 3 hours on the road, we spotted a team searching for landmines.
My name's Sam. We just wanted to check if this road is really safe and which are the safe bits on the road to drive.
Depois, talvez 400 metros antes da estrada, antes da ponte do Cuquema.
The good news is that we have already been through a town where they've just found a mine this morning on the road that we've just travelled. The bad news is that they've also found some on the road ahead of us. Nonetheless, he says that the road is pretty safe, but because that many are so heavily and deeply buried over many years, they float up to the surface when the road's being used, if there's roadworks, and so on. So no road in Angola is really truly safe, and we've actually been over an area that's sort of safe, and we're going into one that is sort of safe. The US wants to treble the amount of oil it imports from West Africa over the next 10 years or so, and a lot of this will come from Angola. Its oil fields lie mostly off the coast of an enclave called Cabinda. The discontent brewing in the rest of the country has fueled a separatist movement which has been fighting in Cabinda for years. They can see the oil platforms. Their beaches are black with pollution. They say they're seeing none of the profits. This is the fence that surrounds Malonga, which is the heart of Angola's oil industry. It's a huge area that is completely off limits to anybody who isn't in the oil industry. And although Angola is one of the first signatories to the international ban on mines, the oil industry is an exception to that rule. The whole of the Malonga complex is surrounded with a minefield.
The Angolan government recently stepped up attacks against the separatists.
And the consequences of this increased military activity have been disastrous for the civilians who've borne the brunt of the Angolan government's attempts to defend its oil interests.
Refugees have filled the villages close to Chevron's oil complex. Moises once farmed an area 50 miles east. He told me what happened when rebels killed some soldiers near his village.
The army came back to his village and lined up all the civilians and then got in touch with their headquarters. And he says the officer in charge was told to kill one person for every dead Angolan soldier, plus 2. So they selected 5 people.
Moises was one of them.
So you were forced to sit down, and then the single gunman worked his way along the line. First 3 were killed instantly, and the last 2 got up to run as they were being shot. Moises was hit first in the shoulder, then in the hand, and then his side was grazed. He managed to keep running away into the forest.
This wasn't an isolated incident in the battle for control of Cabinda. We came across many terrifying stories in these villages.
Quando chegaram à minha casa, vieram me acordar quando foi 2 horas de madrugada.
They told everybody to get into their houses and stay quiet if they heard shooting outside. Andre heard shooting outside and put his head outside the door and remonstrated with the troops and asked them what on earth they thought they were doing. And at that point, from the other side of the house, he heard his son screaming that his mother was dead.
American willingness to make bedfellows of autocratic Arab regimes threatens its oil supply from the Middle East. In Cabinda, it's in danger of making the same mistake. Back in Luanda, the capital rocks to the sound of wealth being consumed by the capital's gilded youth. No one in the government was prepared to speak to me, except Maria de Luz Magales, who's a minister responsible for the country's reconstruction.
Here in Luanda, I've seen children living in the sewers, hanging from the ceilings with human feces flowing beneath them. And at the same time, I've seen young Angolan sons of ministers, daughters of ministers and people close to the president living the life of billionaires. Is there a danger that there could be a backlash against these people?
Eu acredito que sim, mas então é uma das grandes tarefas deste.
Of course, she said, but that is one of the major tasks of this ministry, to prevent that from happening.
Problema. Estamos a tentar encontrar formas rápidas, não podemos.
But your president, who earns $2,000 a month, is building 2 private palaces. His daughter owns one of the 2 cellular telephone companies and a private jet. You don't make all that money just with a government salary, do you?
Eu não conheço isso. No.
You don't know about this?
No.
You live in Luanda, of course
Yes.
you know about this. How much have the American oil interests actually fueled corruption? Because perhaps they see it's easier just to pay somebody and get on with the work.
Não sei dizer. Não sei dizer.
I don't know. You'd better ask them directly, she said.
Agora, o nível de corrupção, não me pergunta a mim. Eu sou a pessoa certa para responder.
Chevron denies any part in corruption, and this year published every detail of the money paid to the Angolans. Washington needs a stable Angola, but for all the talk of American power, there are limits to its influence. And there is little appetite to nation build here. Not far from the minister's office, I stopped to chat with some children I saw. They were sorting through rubbish.
This is the city dump here, and this is just the rubbish dump.
Yeah, it was full of houses. In 2002, the government decided to destroy everything.
Bom dia.
We'd hardly started filming when a soldier ordered us to turn off the camera. Unstable regimes believe the worse the problem.